Hey everybody, I'm Jody Vance.
And I'm George-affleck.
And it's time for...
Broadcasting live. UnSpun. Yes.
Congratulations.
Yes. Thank you very much. You're referring to my little first time alone on CKNW yesterday? Yeah.
We're going to call it the inaugural voyage. First of many, I'm sure. I listened. I'm so proud of you. I felt like your sister. You did great, George.
Well, thank you very much. It was very fun. It was intense.
It's a big job.
I've done that in 20 years when I was at CBC. So it was fun to get back in there and do that.
So now you and I are on the same team on a couple levels here, both at CKNW as fill-in hosts. And just if people don't realize, you filled in for 3 hours of live radio on the Linda Steele Show in Afternoon Drive, which is a big responsibility on any day, but a day that Donald Trump is impeached for the second time. We're in mid-pandemic, vaccine rollout, political, there's a lot going on. It moves fast, doesn't it?
It was, yeah. Those 3 hours went fast, and of course, there's the pre-show where you have to prep all the stuff, and so it's a good solid 8 hours of intensity. So anybody who thinks these hosts are not working hard, they're working hard, and that you end up after 3 hours, because we do this every week for half an hour, and it's pre-tape, so there's some pressure off on us. You're in there for 3 hours live, and you get out of there, and your head's a bit like, "Boo."
Yeah, you're like, "Where's my glass of wine?" Oh, wait, dry January. Oh. And you've got another opportunity. And because, we're unspun. So we're going to talk about what we're going to talk about. It's not about, we can't talk about that. You're actually doing a column for?
Vancouver is awesome. Every 2 weeks, I'll be doing a local politics column. Mostly about Vancouver, but sometimes maybe beyond Vancouver, but mostly about Vancouver politics because it's a local publication. So working with those guys, Bob Crumbrauer and other amazing, Mike Howell. So really looking forward to that. My first one came out this week, and focused on the city of Vancouver and saying, hey, it's 2021, time to get some stuff done.
I love this column. I really, everybody should read you no matter what platform it might be on. I will do that. We'll get to my column on this platform in just a couple of minutes here, but let's kick off this particular episode of UnSpun podcast. Obviously, people can find your column by following you on social media at George_Affleck. I'm at Jody Vance, which I will obviously retweet all things George-Affleck because he's cool like that. But I loved reading this column because it gave me the satisfaction of seeing you sort of lay down in print the priorities for 2021 for the city of Vancouver in particular, what needs to happen, what should be prioritized and why, very specifically, George. So just take us through sort of the Cole's notes of it. Skip along the surface. Obviously, people can go deeper by reading your full column, but take us through.
Yeah, I touch on Strathcona a little bit, but I'm going to leave that for the most part. I kind of touch on it, obviously, as an issue that now needs to be dealt with in whatever capacity this year, but there'll be a bigger column on that. My main 2 points were that the city itself has not accomplished, this council has not really accomplished much in its 2 years. So the point of the column is all councils across the province are in their 3rd year of a 4-year mandate. So Vancouver is a bit different because in the 4th year, you basically go into election mode. So you have this year to get get something done that you can then go, look what I did. So my point was first, think about what you want to achieve. And one of those things is a community plan of some form. When I was there, we did at least, in my 7 years, I think around 6 community plans. They haven't done one. They haven't even, they have the Broadway corridor, which is, was started when I was there, and it seems to have stalled. I'm not sure what's going on. And then they have their citywide plan, which is a massive, unbelievably expensive, probably never going to be finished. At least it won't be finished in this term, and so therefore will become an election issue. So this massive citywide plan is overly challenging. It's pulled staff away on all the other local stuff they should be doing. And so they need to finish one of these plans, get the Broadway plan done at least soon so that we can start implementing that, because a lot of people are waiting. The train's being built under Broadway. We need to start thinking about what's going to be developed along Broadway. This is the second biggest employment sector in the province, Broadway. it's huge. And so we need to make sure that that we know what's going on there while the train is being built underneath. But the problem is as I point out, and we've talked about this, if this council is motion crazy, these motions, which I describe as work orders for staff, and when they are approved, so they go to staff, and staff have to put them at the top of their to-do list. In this 2 years, this council of 11 people, the mayor and 10 councillors, have put almost 200 motions to council, to staff, to get the work done. It's insane. Some of them are very good quality. Most are PR initiatives or micromanagement of issues that they shouldn't be focused on. So they need to stop, take a break on the motions, focus on getting some stuff done so that they can say, look what we did. And this is our resume. Right now, your resume is inundating staff who, of course, get a lot of heat for being too slow to do things. Well, take a look at your council. I mean, if I was staff, I'd be, hey, I'm trying here, but I've got a desk of motions this high, like it's falling, it's overwhelming. And I think that's what this council needs to first, for 2021, get a community plan done, stop with these crazy motions, and just focus on your job at hand, and stop with the infighting, and stop with these amendments and amendments and amendments and all this stuff. If you watch council, if you ever want to have the torture of watching council, you can watch it online, and you can see that the length they pull these meetings out that don't need to be pulled out of ridiculous conversations and debate and micro managing and writing these staff reports, which really, if you don't like a staff report, you don't like the conclusion of a staff report, here is the conclusion, here's what we want to do, here's the policy we want to enact, here's whatever it might be, then send it back to staff. Say, do a better job. No, it's not good enough. Come back with something better. Here's some rough direction. Don't be writing it on the fly in the chambers. It's just not appropriate or their job. It's not their job to be writing the conclusions to professionals' work. You're not an engineer.
And that's what I think it's in, and therein lies the rub, I guess, and something that you've educated me on a great deal, because the inner workings of City Hall aren't as the layperson might assume. It is a very complex layering of bureaucracy and red tape and departmental, and in council, like watching a council meeting is mind-boggling. And then
it's the Vancouver Council, and in general, it's not the most exciting thing to watch ever.
No, but there's this for me. Like,
that's you falling honestly, over. For those listening, that's Jody falling asleep.
That's me falling asleep. I was just falling, or just like falling over with like just the legalese or the political speak. That's why I love UnSpun. That's why I love it when I talk to, the mayor of Port Coquitlam or the mayor of Delta, when I can have a conversation and say, why did you do it that way? And they say, because we needed to get it done. And when things need to be done, we count on our elected officials to actually do it. And I mean, it's just, we've seen so much garbage that we don't need focused on. Like that for me is the frustration. Good people, they're great people. I have great respect for people who put themselves forward to be in public service, like city councilors do, even Mayor Kennedy-Stewart, who gets a lot of grief from
anybody who signs up.
Right?
Anybody signs up to do their job, I have the respect for. It's the people who don't sign up and complain about the people all the time and attack them on Twitter, like it's happened to me this past week. It's like, okay, if you really want to get involved to make change, run for office.
Run for office. Yeah, and do the work and understand those legalese and the political speak in council meetings. But going back to what you were saying, like, stop trying to do the motions within the motions and the counter motions. Just take that idea that everybody kind of agreed was an idea that we should have on the table in the first place, and send it back to staff and ask them to improve on those pieces so that we can move on to the next item that might actually be something that needs to happen, because our city is really in trouble. Like,
just walk around.
Exactly. You and I feel it. We can see it in overflowing garbage cans. We can see it in people sleeping in every nook and cranny on the streets. We can see it in our parks filling with tents. We can see it in the level of violence that has escalated. We have a mayor who's not on the same page, I guess, as the chair of the board for the Vancouver Police Department. Like, there's
Yeah,
There's so much
or the
that's
premier now apparently, or the federal government. I mean, he seems to have alienated everybody, and that's not exactly the opposite of what he said he would do. I think that we have, and again, going back to these motions, I mean, the problem with doing so many is the good ones get lost,
yeah.
and they also get slowed down because of all the other motions. So, and I know that these councillors want to make a place for themselves, but at the end of the day, most people are not paying attention to what you're doing every day in council.
No.
I would say like less than 5% of the people pay attention of the day-to-day, goings on at City Hall.
City
They
Hall,
really aren't
no.
paying attention. So, but they will pay attention when election comes and go, what did you guys do? What did you achieve? Like, what
did you
in these last 4 years?
What did you do when the issues of the city hit me?
Yeah.
That I will vote for you again. That's what the piece of the puzzle is. There are a lot of people going, you did nothing for Strathcona, or you did nothing when, or you did stand up and say, this is wrong, even though you had no control over what was happening at the park board. Or, when you said, we need to look at budgets in a different way, or we need to push through this housing because we need that for people right now. Like I'm definitely looking down that little who voted how. I'm like, okay, you voted that way on that issue. Check. Like never before. And I think there's an education there for all of us, and why we do what we do every day here on UnSpun podcast, George, is to try and get people engaged in the day-to-day without getting just like politics is a bunch of garbage and they're all corrupt and which is an easy out. If you're not going to get involved and vote, then you can't complain. So
vote or run. I mean, again, it's like, to see this amount of hate against me this week, first because of that, we talked about it last week, that tweet about the whole, what happened in Washington and DC. But then there was like the first that came out that I had this column, and it was like immediate. So much people was hating me. How dare I get this column? Hey, how did I get this column? Well, it's just like there's people that hate me. It's just fine. We all know that. I mean, you get half the city hates me, other half loves me. I don't know. There's always hate when you run for office and you become a politician. But you know how I got the column? I asked. I was like, hey, can I do a column for you guys?
Yeah.
And they're like, oh, well, let's think about it. And then can you send us a sample? Sure. Here you go. Oh, we like that. Pretty good. There you go. I did that.
How about once every 2 weeks? Okay. Sounds good.
And then I'm on CKNW, and people are like, oh, what else is this guy going to get? Man, this is privileged. I'm like, what? I just asked. Well, that's the kind of there's this, this
subset.
For whatever reason hate me, which is fine. I don't mind you hating me, but don't, just because I'm doing things, do some things yourself. Go ask for something. I approached CKNW after I left office. This took 2 years to get to this point. I say, hey, I'd be interested in doing maybe a column, like a video, audio thing, or I worked in radio 20 years ago. Maybe you'd be interested. I've got some experience in politics. I know how to write. I know how to do voice stuff. They're, oh yeah, maybe, yeah, that sounds interesting. And it took 2 years of conversations back and forth, and basically me, it's like applying for a job. You gotta, if you want to.
Well, then they saw you in UnSpun podcast. They saw you here, and we're like, well, we got to have George. Like, come on. Honestly, you have
stuff in life. You
have
these things.
An educated point of view. You have an opinion. You are kind, and you care about your city, your province, your country, and the global community. You are very bright light, George-affleck, and anybody who hates you, I would consider the source. I'm not saying that
I'm
because
not looking. I just think that people who are this hate that you and I both get this kind of hate on Twitter, which is Twitter's not a great example of the real world, but I'm on there. I'm quite active on there, and I don't mind the haters. It's fine, but I also argue just because I get these platforms, it's not magic.
Right.
It's not,
it's work.
I have another job. I run a business, but I do this actually in my spare time. It's because I'm interested in it, and it's you can too.
When people come at you like that, like, why is this privilege? I read that as somebody is jealous.
Yeah, maybe.
Like, that's it. Okay, let's move on. I want to talk about pre-zoning, because you were talking about in your Vancouver's Awesome column, talking about the city plan, talking about, how having a plan really is important when you're building major infrastructure.
A visionary plan. Yeah.
There's significantly impact citizens.
Yeah, zoning. Well, there's this debate that is ongoing, and this was and Tom Davidoff, who's an economist at UBC, and he's very aggressive on this. And actually, the Yes Party in the last election in the city sort of ran on this kind of campaign called pre-zoning area. So, pre-zone an area, pre-zone the whole city, which in a way it is, because there is zoned areas, and you can immediately, you don't have to go through a public hearing process if it's zoned, right? There's this process at any city where if you want to build something somewhere and your development doesn't meet, say, the criteria that's already zoned there, then you have to go through a public hearing and ask to have the space changed, even if there's a vision for that neighborhood that said that site could potentially have that. So there's a debate that goes on about pre-zoning and this pre-zone is kind of an oxymoron, because it's like it's zoning. It's like it's zoning to what it should be, what you would like it to be. And then there's sort of visionary plans. My point has always been, you create a visionary plan for a neighborhood, saying this is what we would like it to look like, and this is the behavior of construction roughly, and here's some areas that we think are opportunity, and then you can zone parts of it as part of a public hearing process, and then you kind of leave the rest of it because it changes, it evolves, and you don't want to be too strict on some stuff. Because
can I just jump in there, because what I feel as somebody who lives in the city and lives nearby what might be a very busy part of the next chapter of Vancouver, pre-zone makes me calmer than zoned, because I could find myself zoned for a much larger structure on my property, which would then put me in a position where now I've got to pay highest and best use property tax. I'd have to move.
Well, yes, correct. Well, no, yeah, that's true. It's true, 100%. The building I'm standing in right now is pre-zoned or zoned for a 6-story building. So therefore, I pay tax on a 6-story building, and there's only 2 tenants in this building on a 2-story building. So my taxes are actually more than my rent in this building, because it's an old building. That's quite common, and that's and it might get zoned even higher as part of the Broadway plan. This Broadway being is kind of a different beast, and that is about because you decide, okay, this is what it's going to look like specifically. But when you're talking about a whole neighborhood, it's a different thing. And so there's a story about I think it was a house. It was a story that I sent you about Joyce Street Station. I think
yes, actually, it's the Joyce Station. The 2020 assessment on this house was 1.24 million. And it is currently, with the change in zoning, can be a mid-rise building, and is now listed on a RE/MAX site at $5.199 million.
And so it's 4 times the value. It's being
4.46 times
what it should be. Now that's fine. Here's the challenge. So I say this is the ultimate debate. I would say that's fine. It's free market. So it's zoned now. That's why it's gone up. What the debate is, it's kind of like the supply and demand debate. To say, okay, if we pre-zone or zone the whole city and say these are this dimension, this is that, or whatever it might be, because it's massive in this scale. If you do that in advance, like everywhere, and upzone everything, then the speculation will decrease, because everything is upzoned in a way. So, but the problem is that's really complicated, and the process of community engagement is important. And if you pre-zone it, you skip the public hearing process. And so there are parts where we've done that, where we pre-zone neighborhoods, and we have done some of the zoning and the Canby corridor and other areas where we try to do it in sections. But we're getting behind. Well, the argument is always like, okay, but it creates speculation. And Tom Davidoff will argue that, but if you do a bunch of it, it reduces that speculation. So, and where,
because he was saying auction off the rights to developers, right? So have that be a bidding thing. There's a real complex sort of octopus to what Tom has, laid it out. I find it complex, and at the same time, I think, okay, because he points to San Francisco, right? He points to models of where it has happened like this.
Affordable at all, but there's the key is obviously density, and
but it's density and how much we pay for property taxes here, because also in Tom's equation is that we underpay exponentially. Ask many Vancouver homeowners whether we feel we're paying too little in property tax. No. I know. I get into the debate all the time, because people don't assess. If there's many studies, and I've put these out there, that shows that you have to look at taxation holistically. You have to look at every tax. You can't just say one property tax is the only tax you pay. It's not how taxation works. We have other taxes that we pay provincially. There are decisions that we make as a province that are,
and taxation policies that are completely different than Ontario or any other United state. I mean, it doesn't, you can't, you can't do apples to apples. It doesn't work that way. So our property taxes on some level, it might be low as a percentage, but it's high if your property is worth a lot of money. But we have, in Vancouver, we have equalization. So we have, this, so we share the pain across the city. Other cities don't. So it's getting the province to change taxation systems, especially for the cities, like spot zone, or like the whole issue of that thing we talked about, lift, like my building. And
the land lift.
Split assessment is something the province doesn't seem to be willing to do. And it does create a bunch of complications.
I think we stay on top of it, and I think we keep talking about it. I like the fact, I thought you were going to go to bullshit cup of coffee there, but almost. Because when we do talk about the United States paying higher property tax, you can also write off your mortgage. So there's that. Like you're paying more here, and you're getting the write off there. You
also don't have health care.
Right. You also don't have the level of taxation that we see in our country, exactly, on our income tax period. Speaking of income, there is some news also at City Hall with regard to
nice
paychecks. Yeah.
Nice segue.
You're welcome.
Well, so two things happened. I guess one is they have stopped, they gave themselves a decrease for the year because of COVID. And so they're taking that money back now. That's waived. They want their regular salary, and they got a big. How much was it? They all got a big raise.
Okay, so their discount that they discontinued the 10% pay decrease that had put into place because of COVID-19, while so many people were laid off and haven't been back to work at all and are living off next to nothing. Our mayor and councillors took a 10% decrease. And they've decided to give that 10% back to themselves. So the mayor, who makes $178,800 a year, and city councillors who make $88,515 a year, needed that extra 10%. They were really living tight on just the fringes. I mean, when I think about this, it makes me so angry. People that are living paycheck to paycheck with no sick leave during a pandemic, where they're being told you stay home if you're sick, and they don't get paid when they stay home when they're sick with COVID-19 because they're a frontline essential worker stocking your shelves at your grocery store. They don't get to give themselves the 10% pay back right now. So this to me smacks is unbelievably tone deaf for any elected official to feel it is appropriate at this point in the depth of darkest second wave of COVID-19, that now is the time to say, you know what, we're good. We can see the end of this. We'll just give that money back to our bottom line.
Yeah, and there's two things going on here. One is the 10% thing right now, and that was something they gave as it wasn't required. They just said let's take 10% off because the city's in trouble and we're all in trouble, and the city, by the way, is still in big financial trouble. And it's a drop in the bucket.
Am I right?
It's a 10% a drop in the bucket overall, but it's a statement. The other argument you could say, and no offense, councils across the region, when you're elected, one of the main things, almost the majority of your time is spent going to events.
Yeah.
Guess what, councillors, and sitting in the council chamber, and with no escape. Guess what council doesn't do anymore? There's no events, and they work from home.
Right.
And they sit at a computer like this and do all the meetings. I mean, it's a little bit easier than sitting in a chamber on your butt for 12 to 16 hours, and no events. You're looking at I would say their work time would be at least cut by 30 to 40% right now based on that. So I would say from a PR and a spin point of view, they should have kept the 10% off for another year. The raise issue, which they also got a raise, that's embedded in a process. And when I was there, we built that process, which is completely hands off. We have nothing to do. The council has nothing to do with it. The process, because we didn't want there to be perception that we were involved in anything to do with so there's a whole mathematical equation that they build this on, and then they come back and they say, this is the math based on the decisions that, the process that was chosen to do. And here's, you have no choice. You're getting this raise. It's like, you kind of get the raise no matter what. It's not even a vote. It just kind of happens. So
there should be no raises if taxes are going up.
Well, they should have kept the 10% off for sure. Yeah. The racing could get complicated because it's like, then you have to change the system, and that's like,
I
You know,
want what you've been asking for since day one of this podcast. I want a bottom up budget line for line of what is spent and why. And if we need to start changing some policies as an entity, as a major metropolitan city, if we need to change some of the way things work, then let's do that, because something's
yeah.
broken, because the
I'd
budget's
also like to add to
bloated,
that, by
the
the way,
debt is, okay, go ahead.
an org chart, an organizational chart. We
Yes,
have
please.
top down. We know all this GMs, and there's all these people in it. There are so many cross divisional partners. We talk a lot about the 43 communication staff, and no, you know, this is not meant to be. This is not.
This one says,
when we talk about that, I wanted to say a nice thing for once about the 43. It's not meant to be an attack on communications people or the community.
No.
It's a metaphor or an analogy of too many staff at City Hall. And I think that if you were to see an org chart and say, and have those, take those 43 people and say, here's what they're doing, and here's the department. They work for several different departments, because they kind of used to have engineering and have a communications person and this person, and then you never knew quite. But we don't know what those people do in that department, and or any department. And there is like finance department that has people that cross over into the other departments. I mean, I don't even think general managers at City Hall know sometimes which department their own staff that they think are theirs are in there. Like, it's so convoluted,
right?
And there's so much room for savings. If you were,
I was going to say, bloated
who
is
the hell
better,
works here?
Bloated is better than convoluted. I think. I think it's the result of just continually adding, as opposed to saying, how can we do this smarter? Which I think we have hit a point where there's no question it's time for how can we do this smarter for the greater good. And it's not about pointing fingers, because that's what we get caught up in. All of us get to the point, it's like, who's responsible for this? As opposed to, let's fix it and then look back and say, how did we get here? Let's fix it first, because this whole let's figure out how we got here is taking so long that we're just continuing to make the same mistakes, because it's how we've always done it. You know what? We're short on time, so I want to get to my column. You ready?
Fast.
That was almost 27 minutes, dude. We have got to get to it. Yeah, I know. Time flies with me. This ain't no 3-hour show, dude. It's 30 minutes.
No commercial breaks either.
No commercial breaks.
Unless you're interested in advertising, please call.
That's right. Curve Communications.
We'll throw an ad in here.
So this week, once again, I mean, I don't know how my column's gotten to be so personal over the last little bit, but I got the call as the essential caregiver for my dad at his care home late last week. I got the call. And when you're essential care and you see the care home's number come up on your call display on your phone, you almost faint, because you don't know what you're about to hear, right? So it's very nerve-wracking to get it. So I'm always relieved when it's like, everything's fine. I'm like, okay. And then we're just calling for consent because the vaccine. I'm like, absolutely, give dad the vaccine. They're like, oh no, you've already given us consent on that. I'm like, oh, okay. And then it said, we're offering it to you. Would you consent to having the COVID-19 vaccine? And I said, absolutely. And I said, when? And they said, well, we'll get back to you with the exact date and time. And I'm like, okay. And I hung up the phone, and I was shocked at how I felt. I was surprised by some of the emotions that I felt over the next number of minutes and days, really, between that phone call and 3 days later when I actually received the shot. It's in my arm. It's right in here.
You're still
just like,
you don't have a second head, as far as I can tell. You seem to have made it through.
No, my DNA has not changed. I've not been microchipped. It was just like getting a flu shot. I had no side effects. I'm told, however, that the second dose, I might experience effects of maybe aches or feverish or what have you. No live virus in it. It's just building up the immunity. I'm part of the firewall to protect my dad. I'm part of the employees
This is where
considered.
deaths are happening, right? This is what we need to stop. These people dying every day. The majority of them are in these homes. We need to stop that. And this is the way to do it, for sure.
Yeah, and it really gave me hope at the end of all of the emotions. You can read my column to hear it, because I literally didn't talk to anybody. I did tell you, full disclosure, you're one of the 5 people in my life who I told that I was doing this. I didn't put out for public opinion. I just decided I'm going to do it because it's the right thing to do, because my mom said, you're crazy if you don't do this. And I'm like, you're right. Okay, I will go. But read about it at the Orca.ca. It's called The Call, and it's got somebody getting a vaccine, not me, but loading a thing. And you can read all about sort of how I felt. But I think the most important piece of this for me, and the message that I would like to give to our listener right now, is when you get the call, take the shot, because I feel so much hope, right? But the level of like, I feel one step closer to this being over. And there were 200 people who got vaccinated that day when I was there, 200 of us. And that's just one little home and one little spot and one little place. It's going to get so much bigger, so much faster here. And before we know it, we're all going to be with one shot and then two and then through. So you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. Yes, I'm quoting Wayne Gretzky. Take the shot. Take the shot.
Nice.
Say goodnight, George.
Have a nice week. We'll see you next time.